Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Goodfellas. This film came out in 1990. It was directed by Martin Scorsese. We've lost a handful of iconic actors who have contributed heavily to pop culture as far as the mob genre is concerned in movies and in TV. Ray Liotta, James Caan, and Tony Sirico most recently, and I've been meaning to review Goodfellas for quite a long time, so, now seems as good a time as any. The evolution of the gangster genre as far as Hollywood is concerned throughout the decades is very interesting to me. I'm personally a huge fan of like 1930s pre-code era mobster movies that have more like that Irish brassiness, but then obviously you move into like the 70s and more like the postmodern Italian-American filmmakers. Everything becomes more operatic and more Shakespearean in tone, and things are also more authentic. Just more academic. It's more self-aware as far as more the cinematic influences that a lot of these filmmakers are drawing on, which does make sense because that is the first academic generation of filmmakers who were formally educated for the cinema. And I think you can feel that. You can just feel the heightened sensationalism and the melodrama. It's all very much in the style of like the great Italian operas like Tosca or La Boheme, something like that. And yet the focus is more intimate in nature. And a lot of times the themes in these movies tend to, be more personal to the actual filmmakers or the writers, often focusing more on personal identity and family, the morals within your family, etc. And this is a world, certainly, that Martin Scorsese understands. And I think you sense in his career, at least right through the point of Goodfellas, he's making projects, I think, that are the most personal to him at that point. And I do argue, actually, that Goodfellas is maybe Scorsese's last masterpiece that he ever made. Maybe that is a controversial statement. Not to say that his films after Goodfellas are bad. Certainly they're not. He's made some fantastic films, wonderful films that I absolutely adore. I just don't think they have the same pure creative impulses that are nurtured in the same ways that I feel are when I watch Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and so on. I think he started to kind of buy into his own hype a little bit, which is very common for all kinds of very talented filmmakers. And I almost feel like he almost felt like he had a certain responsibility to make a certain type of film at this point. And certainly some of them are very important. And I could be wrong on that when it comes to how I'm reading Scorsese there, but I don't know, I miss this particular time and before that for him. I think this is a riding high moment, and it is a moment where everything is flourishing absolutely perfectly at the right moment, where all of Scorsese's previous themes in his movies about like Catholic guilt and masculine expectation and naturally some internalized misogyny, American glamour, etc., it all feels like very important, vulnerable pieces of himself. And he's drawing upon all of that. And that is very refreshing in a type of film like this, a movie that is more known for its bravura and more for its technical confidence. And I think, Scorsese is known for a lot of that technical confidence. A lot of times that can overshadow the intent. And I feel like there's nothing overshadowed here because Scorsese is fascinated by the mob. We all know this. And, it's a big part of, I think, his background in terms of his childhood, where he grew up in the world. He's a child in the time where a lot of organized crime and everything, it's like they're riding on the fumes of this golden age of the mafia, a time when outlaws ruled everything and the cops just pretend like they don't see anything. And I don't know, I just think that's a very fascinating period in American history. And I think that Scorsese really is observant, and he's absorbing all of this different stuff as he's a kid. It's all very important, especially in a movie like this, because this movie does begin in that same way. It's kind of at the very end of that golden age, and it's going to quickly fizzle as we go into the 60s, especially the 70s and the 1980s. But Scorsese growing up, in Little Italy in the 1940s and the 1950s, all of this is on his doorstep, and that is why the world building in this movie is just so amazing. It's as if he has forged a special civilization for this film. This film almost feels like I'm witnessing some self-serving organism that works all on its own, and you just kind of sit back and watch it thrive and watch it flourish. There are no elements here that feel loose, that feel messy, or thinly sketched, or heavy-handed. Everything is weaving in and out, and the violence, even though it might be very operatic in style and everything, the humor and the irony and the emotional weight of everything, or lack thereof, I think creates a more complex image, something more dense. But the world building, I can't get over how amazing it is. And every time you watch it, you notice more and more new things. And it's not like just a few things here and there. You notice a lot of new things. There's just so much to absorb. And, like every person in the background of this movie, every little mannerism, every name, everything matters here. It's like you can see the thumbprints of every single person here. It's vibrating with such originality, whether we're cooking like Sunday gravy in prison or we're sitting at the table with Martin Scorsese's mother. Yes, he did cast his mother in the film, just basically playing herself. And, we're discussing her dog paintings right before we stab somebody that's locked in the trunk of the car. I do feel like, I think the first time I saw this film, it was kind of like, okay, I feel like I need to watch that again, but in slow motion, just because, like I said, there's so much going on. There's so much to absorb all at once, and the pacing of everything is quite quick. You turn away for a brief period, and yes, you're probably going to miss a few things, but it is truly a symphony of all kinds of moving pieces constantly, like some sort of great waltz that never stops. It's like a carnival of lights and color. It's just whirling around, and you get swept up, in the rhythm of it. You're like wrapped up in the bravura of everything. I felt very starry-eyed watching it, especially in the first act. And sometimes I am absolutely swooning. It has me in the palm of its hand. And at other times I'm like, stop the ride. I want off, because naturally the claustrophobia and the consequences for these people are going to become the focus. And that's what I like about it. Any sort of romanticism in this film, I think it's important because it's supposed to give us a sense of the world, because we do need to see it through rose-colored glasses. We do need to see it through the eyes of our young protagonist, Ray Liotta's character. But only so long as we can let it linger, only to squash it on sight and then allow reality of the situation to settle in. And obviously that's not going to be so glamorous, and that's very jarring. And that constant reminder of that, especially of our moral dilemmas and everything, constantly keeps these characters human, but it also keeps just the whole movie from becoming aimless or gratuitous. Watching the first hour of this film, I felt almost like, it's like Scorsese is so on his game here. It's like an Olympic athlete that's training maybe in the final weeks leading up to the Olympic Games or something, where it's like you're in the best shape of your life, that sort of thing. And I think that's required for a film this ambitious in terms of the editing and everything, because this film does feel like one long montage of different fluctuating speeds. And yet there's always a sense of when you need to change that rhythm, when we need to be egged on, when we need to be shoved, but it's all seamlessly orchestrated. And it is a collage of textures and moments, all presented in a way that, yes, now feels very typical, but at the time, it certainly wasn't. And the moments in the film that are so iconic, that have been endlessly quoted, throughout the years, I don't know, rewatching them this time, it hit differently. It hit me with like a special kind of freshness, and I do not know why that is. It's never been so obvious to me why these are so iconic, these moments. And they were obvious to me always. That "Why Am I Funny" scene that introduces the Joe Pesci character, it is just one of the most funny. It's so brilliant, and it is just pure farce. And they just let it stretch that tension more and more and more. And they want to see, it's like, how much can we get away with? How ridiculous can we take it before it goes completely off the rails? But yet it's always so under control. And it is such an important statement, I think, in the movie. It's like the first time we're really kind of slowing down just a hair and getting a sense of these people a little bit. But we need to feel that laugh away from a kill kind of energy between those people. Always teetering on the edge of just complete boredom and then sensationalism, between humor and violence, laughter and terror. It's just a constant tightrope act. And that famous tracking shot where Henry takes Karen, to the restaurant for the first time, and it was just really singing for me here, and it always did, but I don't know, I felt it really vibrating with this cinematic power for me this time. I was just really carried away by it. It's powerful because, yes, it is a long tracking shot, but that's not the thing that draws my attention. Actually, the first time that I saw this, I didn't even really notice that it was a single shot, because I don't think that the technical things here are the focus. I do feel like a lot of times these kinds of shots, that is the focus. It's like the mechanics is meant to be the point of the scene. And I feel like that's kind of, counterintuitive. The story within this shot is always unfolding, and there are always moving pieces within, the frame. Karen is slowly being introduced into this world she doesn't understand and learning about the person next to her, as are we. And the way that the music builds, I don't know, I just think it's electric. And like I said, when you have, really technical movies like this that are so dependent on the detail for everything and the rhythm, it's like, typically, it's the mechanics of everything. It's like they're shouting it from the rafters, like, look how cool this movie is. And I don't feel that feeling with this movie. Again, it feels very authentic. It's It's an attitude. The flourishes contribute to a much bigger piece, and they add to a much, bigger experience overall. Just the whole time, I had like a smile on my face, and I felt the impact of everything in ways I never had before. I think I absolutely enjoyed this film more than I ever have, which is really awesome. Even though I really, really like this movie, I do think still it is one of those movies that I appreciate more than it emotionally resonates with me. But I will defend it in the sense, like what I said before, when you watch it multiple times, the emotion does sink in more and more because you're, absorbing more of the characters in the story and everything. But, obviously when people look at like great gangster films, it's always like Goodfellas or The Godfather. It's like, which one is better? It's an apples and oranges thing, but like personal taste thing, I prefer something like The Godfather. Because even when I do watch the films multiple times, I love the characters, but they certainly don't resonate with me in the way that the characters in The Godfather do. And especially that the protagonist doesn't have that same kind of identity crisis that really is powerful for me. And there's something slow and rich and subtle about The Godfather where I guess I'm more drawn to the melancholy of everything, the more resonant themes about family and personal identity and such. But more than that, of course, I am a die-hard Sopranos fan, and obviously The Sopranos would not be possible without either of these, especially Goodfellas for sure, but it took all of these different pieces from Goodfellas and other films as well, deconstructs them, subverts them. It did something that no other mob story had ever done, and that is very, very rare for sure, but it basically begins right where Goodfellas ends, because what's, the last thing that we see, it's Ray Liotta going to get the paper in the morning in the very boring suburbs. And thus we enter the sedentary age where all that existential weight starts to creep in, and this new age of the gangster genre, deconstructing it, carries on. And I guess with something like The Sopranos, you can really settle into a world, really get to know certain characters. And of course, yes, a TV show is a TV show. A movie is a movie. They serve very different purposes, of course, but I do think that no film, and I absolutely stand by this, I don't think any film in Hollywood that's, like a mob type of movie has ever captured the raw emotional power of The Sopranos, nor have any of them been as ambitious thematically. None of them ask the same questions about mortality and questioning life and reality and consciousness. None of them do it the way that The Sopranos does. All the rest of them are grounded in reality in a way. And I don't know, I think that Sopranos is kind of drifting into the stratosphere in very unique places. And again, I know that's all, just a personal taste thing, what I'm saying here, but it is something that I do believe very strongly, is that something like The Sopranos is always going to overshadow stuff like Goodfellas for me. But as a work of art, I do think that Goodfellas is one of the best of the mafia films when it comes to Hollywood. And it feels very personal for Scorsese. Yes, maybe Raging Bull or something feels the most personal and the most raw, but I don't know, there's something about this too. They're very different, but this really has so much of him in it. It's flashy, but I think it disguises a lot of vulnerability at the same time. And I think there's a lot of grit here. But yeah, I also do think that it is easy for films like this to be overlooked because of how famous they are, overlooked because of how many times they are quoted. And I admit I may have overlooked it myself for those reasons, but yes, it is always a thrill every time I return to it, no matter how many times people quote it. When you really allow yourself to get into it and let it fly, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. A film I think that almost everybody should see if you haven't already. But yeah, that's my recommendation and that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters who are wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. Welcome to the new members. If you are interested in joining, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.